Working hard won't fix a broken system. And in today's episode, I'm going to break down why most athletes hit a wall in their athletic development. What is up, guys, and welcome back to the Impact Performance Show. I am your host, Coach Chris Lingham here, and today we're going to be breaking down why most athletes are being developed backwards. So, if you haven't seen some of our previous episodes or videos, make sure you take a second to go check that out. Our past video, the 3 core biggest problems holding most athletes back, and then why most athletes never reach their full potential. That was episode 1 of the show. So make sure after today's show, if you want to go back and learn and dive into some of those episodes, that today is your opportunity to go back and check those out. Those were great videos. One was only about 15 minutes versus the other one was a little bit longer of a podcast episode. Also, if you are a parent or a coach looking to develop athletes better and have a really sound principle, scientific approach at doing it, you can also check out my book in the description section, A Parent's Guide to Athlete Development. Now let's dive into today's show, where we're going to break down the problem why most athletes are not undertrained. They're just being developed in the wrong sequence, right? So when we think about athlete development, we have to look at it as it's a pyramid, right? Some of the highest elite level skill sets are going to be at the top of the pyramid, while our foundation is going to be at the bottom of that pyramid, right? It's the base. This is what gives us good fundamentals that are going to allow us to be able to develop these athletes to their full potential, right? So in today's video, we're going to break down what that actually means by going into our athlete development framework. But before we do that, I want to help clearly define this problem, right? And what it means to develop people in the wrong sequence or the wrong order, or develop people backwards, right? What does that even mean? So most people are focused on their skills, the strategy, right? And these things are being prioritized before we focus on movement quality, strength, power, speed, or recovery. And I would most likely say that recovery is almost non-existent in today's performance world. It's starting to kind of break through. It's starting to become more mainstream, so people are paying attention to recovery, but they don't really actually know how to recover or why recovery is important for athletic development. Now, so let's dive in and let's go a little bit deeper and talk a little bit more about our athlete development framework. So when we think about developing athletes, we have to think about doing it in an order, right? We have to do it in an order. And I think about this as every training session that I have with an athlete, I'm going to follow a sequence. Every block of training, whether that's 4 weeks, 12 weeks, a year, I'm going to follow a sequence in that training, right? So I want you to think about this. Like if you were a coach and you got an athlete that came into your gym, right? And if you're a parent and you're sending your athlete into a gym, you wouldn't expect them to just like right away start doing the most advanced speed drills that coach has to offer, right? It would be silly, right? But the reality is that most people are walking into facilities and they're kind of just getting thrown into the fire with the rest of the athletes. And most of those workouts are really working on a lot of those elite skills. Now, I talk about this in some of my videos on why I think we have this problem where most programs are focused on building elite, right? Or you go on Instagram and you see elite athleticism, right? Or use these 5 drills to build elite speed, right? So everyone's so focused on elite, while majority of the athletes that we work with are not elite. Right? Majority of the athletes that we work with are average or above average at best, right? And we're ignoring those, right? And specifically the ones below average that really can get to average or maybe even a little bit above average with the right sound principled approach, right? We're ignoring those athletes and we're focusing on the things that are at the highest level, right? And this is a big mistake. And I think that the reason why this happens is, like I said, coaches are doing this because it's going to get them more exposure, and more exposure equals more athletes in their mind, versus I think the biggest thing that's going to deliver more athletes into your program is going to be more results, right? So I've run Impact Performance and Fitness for 13 years, and one of the cornerstones of what we were able to use to grow our membership from when I first opened this gym, like I started that gym out of my backyard, out of my parents' backyard, and then I grew into a 3,000 square foot studio, and we got thousands of clients, different results, whether they're adult clients looking for performance or athletes looking to take their game to the next level. What we were able to do with them in that small facility was based on our sequence and our order, but most importantly, our focus on actually delivering results. So this is where I think the biggest mistake is happening today, is that most people are focusing on the drill, we're focusing on the concept of being elite, and we're not focused on actually delivering results. And results start, number one, you can't get results if you don't measure, right? So if we don't measure, we don't know our progress, right? And I think it starts at the assessment level, right? Most people come into a program and they get, like I said, thrown into the fire. They're training with the wolves, and we don't really know what that athlete specifically needs to improve their game, right? Do they need more mobility? Do they need more strength? Are they fast, but like they don't have endurance to be able to keep up with that speed? Like, these are the things that we need to find out, you know, in that first week when we work with someone new, so that we can determine what we're going to do to actually help develop that athlete. When I was working with the Overbrook baseball team, I didn't just build them an 8-week strength and conditioning program that, you know, right off the gate, like, okay, guys, like, here's your baseball program. I know nothing about you. Here you go. This is going to help you take your game to the next level. That's not what happened. We ran a team combine with them. We brought them in. We did testing. We did assessment. And I was able to identify the biggest limiting factors that was holding their team back from improving their performance, right? So we had guys that were strong, but, you know, not everyone was strong. We had guys who were fast, but not everyone was fast, right? We had guys that could be strong and fast, but didn't have really good quality movement. So what we did was we assessed them. We looked at all of that data, and then we created an 8-week program, and then the results showed up on the field. They had more extra base hits. They had more home runs, right? They were stealing more bases that next year. All of these things happen not because we just gave them an 8-week program and said, have at it, is that we looked at what they actually needed to be successful in their sport, and then we developed a program based on that. Could you imagine if I gave them something that I would have done with the University of Texas, if I just was like, oh, here's University of Texas's baseball program. I wrote this for them. They're awesome. So I'm going to give this to Overbrook baseball, right? Overbrook High School baseball. Like, that wouldn't happen, right? And it would be crazy to think that they would be successful at it. Number one, we probably would burn them out, right? We would fry their central nervous system. They wouldn't be able to recover, and it just wouldn't be effective for them, right? They would have some results from it, don't get me wrong, because any program is going to produce results. But if you want to maximize the results that you produce, you need to make sure that you're following sound principles. And those principles are, number one, you should assess, because you need to know where it is that you're going. And number two, you need to build a specific program based on those needs. And then you need to track them along the way to see if what you did is actually working, right? And I think that once you, like, that's one thing that we've done at Impact forever, is we followed that process, right? We didn't try to guess. We didn't try to be too smart, right? A lot of the things that I realized was that early days of Impact, I wrote way more elite stuff, right? Longer I stayed in and the longer I worked with people, the more I realized we didn't need as much of the elite stuff as we needed some of the stuff in the beginning and the middle more, and that's what actually was turning that dial up a little bit on athletic performance. People were performing better when we stopped focusing on, you know, elasticity and foot quickness, right? And like, you know, and then jumping explosive power and reactive change of directions, right? Like, so there's all these things that are really cool with sports performance, and they're really great and they're very necessary, right? But I think that we have to look at when we actually put that into that athletic journey. And a lot of times we don't need to put that in the beginning. We need to really put that in at the end, after the athlete has actually showed that they have, right? They have good movement quality. They have good strength. They have developed power. They've turned that power into speed. And they've shown you that they can recover, because you have to be able to earn your next level. And the only way you can earn that next level is you have to earn that adaptation, and the adaptation comes from your recovery. So we can do a whole nother episode on adaptation and recovery. For this episode, we're going to stick to our framework. So let's dive in. let's go through the 5 pillars of the athlete development framework, starting with number 1. All right, number 1, we're going to look at movement quality. All right, so when I start with an athlete, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at movement quality for that athlete. How do they move, right? We assess them, right? The first time in, the first session that they do is going to be an assessment, and we're going to take them through a movement screen. We're also going to test other things that we need to see for performance, but one of the biggest things we're going to do in that assessment is we're going to look at movement quality. Now, when we think about movement quality, I want you to think about balance and coordination. That's a huge part of movement quality. Spatial awareness. Why is spatial awareness important? Because when we're dealing with athletes, basketball players and soccer players and football players, they're moving in space and there's other athletes, right? So if you're like clumsy, right, if you have poor coordination, spatial awareness, you're like falling and tripping over other people, right? So your ability to move and be agile or evade defenders, right, really comes down to your coordination, your balance, and your spatial awareness, right? And then there's other things that are going to limit the athlete, like stability, their joint stability and joint mobility, right? So number 1, do you have mobility? This is your ability to move at the joints and have control over that movement. And then number 2 is stability, right? So are those joints stable? We see a lot of people twisting ankles or spraining their ankles or tearing their ACL, PCL, LCL, right? Or messing with their patellar tendon, right? We see a lot of shoulder injuries, right? So, are your joints stable to resist injury, and are they mobile to be able to move, right? Do you have good movement quality? Because if you have poor mobility, well, you're probably going to run into an injury. And if you have poor stability, you're also going to run into an injury. So we have to address those things when we look at movement quality. We have to look at stability, we have to look at mobility, coordination, balance, and spatial awareness. If we can help an athlete develop all of those things, all of those qualities at a high level, well, those are going to give them exponential success in their performance, right? Because you can't develop power, you can't develop strength unless you have the base already there, right? If they don't move well, then if you're trying to squat and they can't squat to a full range, well, we're not developing their full potential when it comes to their strength. And then if they try to jump and they're going, we call it an end range, right? So if I'm trying to explain this in an easy way. If I'm getting ready to jump, right? We look at the squat movement as the person's going to lower and descend, and then they're going to explode up and jump, right? So in a squat, we follow that same pattern, so that's at slow speed. But when we add speed to that, that's now power. So if I'm getting ready to, say, do a box jump, I need to lower myself down almost like I'm squatting and then jump up. Now, if I have poor mobility, right, what's going to happen is I'm not going to have good range of motion. Right? Meaning that I'm not going to be able to get low into that squat. So if you have an athlete who can't squat, say, to their knees level, which is like 90 degrees, it's going to make it really hard for them to jump. But what we see is that we actually are training people to do this anyway. And the problem is that now we're adding speed on top of this function. So a person lowers down to do that jump squat or that box squat, right? And they get ready to explode. But now they're passing their end range and they're really irritating a lot of their tissue there. And this is when you start having soft tissue injuries in athletes. It's typically happening when we haven't developed the end ranges or the range of motion. And then now we're adding speed or more force on top of that movement pattern. And now we're exposing that athlete to a higher risk of injury. So where I see most people go wrong is that they haven't earned the right to be explosive yet, but yet the program says this is what we're doing, so we just do it. And that's when we're really starting to hurt our athletes because we're not focusing on their needs, we're just focusing on sending people through the program that we wrote. So as a coach, right, we have to really look at, did we do a good assessment? Do we see what Johnny or Jackie or Brittany needs? And then are we actually adjusting their training? It's great to run group training, but if you're not adjusting that person's individual training, you're really doing them a disservice. Now, if you're a parent, you need to be looking at, hey, I just joined this program. Did they actually take my kid through an assessment? Did they ask him or her any questions? Did they follow up with me and give me any breakdown on the things that are limiting factors or the areas that we can improve on with their athlete? Or did they just take my money and throw them into a workout? right? These are and so for parents, when you're online and you're looking for, what should my kid be doing, you shouldn't be looking at the 5 best speed drills, right? Or how to make elite, agility, right? Or like elite change of direction drills, right? That's not what you should be looking at, or the questions that you should be asking, like, should my kid be doing that? You should be asking, hey, did this person that I hired to train my kid actually take the time to put them through an assessment and see what they actually needed? Or did they take my money and just throw them into a program with a bunch of other people and really ignore their individual needs, right? And I'm sorry if you're out there and you're doing that right now. Actually, I'm not sorry. You should probably change it, and you should step your game up, right? So if you felt like a little twinge there, like I'm talking about you, that's good. That's a moment of growth, and that should help you make your program a lot better. All right, so now moving on. Number 2, strength, right? So strength is our ability to absorb force and in our ability to produce force. And I say it in that order because most of the time we focus on producing force, right? We focus on how much force we can produce, how much weight we can lift, how much weight I can squat, how much weight I can deadlift, how high I can jump, right? How far I can do on a broad jump, how far I can throw a med ball, or how fast I can throw it, right? We look at in baseball or softball, can you produce a lot of like power into that ball? Can you generate force into that ball? What we don't look at is our ability to absorb force. Now, why that's important? I heard this analogy before. This is like taking a very powerful engine. So think about like American muscle car, right? Like a GT or a Mustang or a Camaro, right? And we have this really strong V8 engine put into this car, right? And you start that car up and you rev the engine, right? I'm just like being silly, but we rev that engine up and then we take off, and the tires are screeching, right? And then we're getting speed. It's like you're watching that speedometer just go up, go up, go up. And then imagine we didn't put brakes on that car, right? Or imagine that car had brakes, but they didn't work that well. So you're trying to like slow down now after this car is hitting top speed, and what's going to happen, right? It's a disaster, right? You're probably going to crash into something, or you're going to have metal on metal if we did have brakes and they weren't really that good, right? But that's what we do in sports, right? That's what we do in training. We build the engine, but we don't actually look at the braking forces for them. Right? So it's important that we actually teach athletes how to slow down. And the reason is that the braking forces, or the ability to absorb force, is going to be the ability to to make sure they don't get injured, right? So a lot of times if you are sprinting, right, and then you go to stop, right, in a game, like that's usually when you're going to have an injury happen, right? It's the stopping, right? You see sometimes people get injured when they're trying to accelerate, but it's oftentimes when they're trying to decelerate or change direction that you're going to run into most injuries. So in our performance program, it's important if we want to help people avoid injuries in training or avoid injuries in sport, that we teach them to absorb force just as much as we teach them to actually generate force. All right, so that's number 2, that's strength. So the next one, number 3, and we can look at this actually, like if we wanted to have this and spread this out to 6 things, we could, because really each one of these are a little bit different, but speed and power. All right, so number 3, speed and power. So speed is the ability to apply force rapidly, right? And then we need the ability to actually sustain it. Speed and power. The ability to apply force rapidly and to sustain it. So what does that mean? When we think about running, right? If we're going to sprint 10 yards, right? That's speed. Now, in baseball, we would test the 60-yard dash. And then in football, we would test the 40-yard dash. So in baseball, if you're noticing in that test, we actually have to sustain speed a lot longer, right? In track and field, you usually might see a 100-yard dash or even a 200 or a 400, right? So can we generate speed, but then do we have the abilities to sustain top levels of speed for a longer period of time? The same thing goes to power, right? Can we jump, right? Can we produce power? If you're a basketball player or volleyball player, can you jump up and get to the rim? Can you jump up over that net and spike the ball, right? But our ability to sustain that power might be, it might look a little bit different, right? So the athlete goes up for the shot, right, to the rim, and it bounces off the rim, and now they got to jump up and get the rebound, and then they jump back up and they try to lay it up. The ball bounces off of the rim, and then they jump back up to rebound that ball, right? So you've seen it before in sports where it's like constantly jumping up and jumping down to try and get that ball back into the net. Well, that would be power and the ability to sustain that power. So multiple jumps, right? That could happen in volleyball if you're having a volley going back and forth, right? And you jump up, you hit the ball, and then now the ball comes back, and now you got to recover. You got to jump up and do it again. So it's that ability to do power repeatedly, right? It's the ability to run fast for a longer period of time, or to run fast, stop, and then run fast again, stop, and then run fast again. So a lot of times we look at developing speed and power as, oh, we're going to work on our takeoff and acceleration, but we don't think about, are we able to sustain that and repeat that speed or that power? So I think it's really important in athletics that we're looking at both of those things, right? Not just the ability to run fast, but the ability to run fast, have to slow down, maybe turn around, change direction. What would that look like? Like on the soccer field right now, we have FIFA going on. So maybe I go for a run on the soccer field, I get the pass, and then I'm sprinting, and then like I get the ball, now I got to slow down. Then I'm gonna field that ball, I'm gonna kick it, and I'm gonna pass it to another teammate, and I'm gonna take off and I'm gonna run again, right? So that would be sustaining speed in the game of soccer, right? It's that, and when we think about sports, we rarely just run straight and then we're done. Like maybe a wide receiver, runs a route and then he comes back to the huddle and then he goes back out there, but we would still need to sustain that, right? So if we think about, there's like 24 seconds in between plays, they're running for 5 to 8 seconds, and then they come back to the huddle, they get the next play, and then they got to do it again, right? And they got to do it again. So our ability to sustain speed and power is important, and that has a lot to do with our athletic energy systems, right? So if we have poor energy systems, we're not going to be able to repeat speed or power. And so when we're training, we need to focus on our training to develop speed. And yes, it's not just going to be 5 drills that help speed, right? When we think about speed, you can't have speed without strength, right? So strength is our slower speed expression of power. And then power is our quick expression of strength, right? I hope that makes sense, right? So if I'm doing a really, really heavy deadlift, right? Let's use this as an example. I'm doing like a 500-pound deadlift, right? I'm not going to be able to move that bar very quickly. That bar is going to move slowly, right? So it's at a speed in which I'm using my strength to drive through the floor and get that bar to the top position. But we are working on power development in that, because we are using more of a max effort. Now, if I wanted to drop that weight really low and see how fast I can move a bar in a deadlift position, so I'm now doing deadlift for speed, well, now that's also power, right? And the reason why is because power is expressed at 2 different levels. In our program, I like to look at it as slow speed power and high speed power. All right, so slow speed power and high speed power. And it's important to develop both. One is more speed strength, and then the other one is more absolute power. So your ability to move a lot of weight as quick as you can, right? And then your ability to move a little bit of weight as quick as you can. If you train both, that's the secret to training real power and speed, is that you do both of those. And you can't really fully get the most out of that with inadequate strength, which is why movement quality first, strength comes second, and then we can fully develop our speed and power, because if we don't have those two before it, then we're limited on the amount of speed and power we can produce, right? And then if you don't have energy system training in your training at all, then your ability to sustain your speed and power is going to be diminished by fatigue. All right, so that is number 3 on our movement development framework. Number 4 is and this is where we're going to get into where we talked about being developed backwards, is because this is where most people are really focused on. And number 4 is our skill and our strategy, right? So this is where our spatial awareness and change of direction really come into play. So in our program, when we're doing change of direction drills, these are more of our skill work. So it's your ability to generate speed, stop, and then reaccelerate. So we're taking what we said with strength, which is our ability to absorb force and produce force, right? And then we have speed, so how fast and how quickly we can do that. And then now we're tying it into skill, which is your change of direction, your cutting, your agility, right? So notice this theme, right? They all kind of play into the next one, right? So where most people are making a mistake is they're working on the change of direction, they're working on agility, they're working on reactive ability, so they're doing multiple jumps really, really quick, right? Or doing elastic training with their ankles and having ankle stiffness, right? So we're doing all this stuff, right, that is necessary, but not at that right particular time. And, right, so it's not that it's not necessary, it's that the order in which we're doing that stuff is being prioritized before we've prioritized their movement and their strength, right? And because of that, we haven't really developed their full potential and their speed and their power. So if you're focusing on your cone drills and your cuts and your ladders, and you're running, for instance, an hour-long speed training workout, but you're ignoring strength training, you're not teaching them the fundamentals of power, right? Power development. You're not doing any jumps, any plyometrics, any bounding, any depth jumps, any force absorption, right? If we're not doing any of those things, or if we're not deadlifting, we're not squatting, we're not doing lunges or split squats, right? If we're not doing the things that develop those foundations, then all of the skills and the strategy we do are not going to have that much of an impact, right? In order to really see skills and strategy really play out on a high level, you have to do the other stuff first, right? So if I want to train someone's agility and their speed, if they can absorb force when they go to cut at that cone and then transfer that energy the other way, think about if I have a really strong athlete and then I teach them some football cuts, right, or some soccer agility, their ability to use that in the game and be extraordinarily talented with that is going to go up dramatically, because we've given them the foundations and the fundamentals required to be able to do that skill or strategy at a high level. So what we look at a lot of times is we look at people who are at a high level and we feel like we need to do what they do, right? But I always go back to that Kobe Bryant. They wasn't with me shooting in the gym, right? We're looking at what people are doing on the field and what they're doing in performance, and we're ignoring what they're actually doing in preparation, or we're ignoring what they've done for their whole life, right? Because most athletes are starting when they're 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, the great ones. We look at Tiger Woods, I'm pretty sure he started playing golf at 3 or 4 years old. If we look at the Venus and Serena Williams, their dad had them on the court when they were tiny little girls, right? They were 4, 5, 6 years old, and they were out there on the courts in Compton playing tennis, right? So they were developing themselves at a very early age, and then as they got onto the stage, right? So we talk about this. Performance is revealed during exposure, right? So when you get exposure, what you've done up until that point is going to show up. So their skills and their strategies show up on the court at the highest level because they were already working on that before they got that exposure. We're too focused on getting the exposure and not getting our athletes actually ready for that exposure. Because when the exposure comes and you've done the work, it's going to show up in the results when you're out there. Right? This means you're going to score more goals, you're going to earn more points, you're going to hit more home runs, you're going to get more base hits, you're going to sink more shots, you're going to throw faster, you're going to run the bases faster, right? That stuff shows up when you've actually put in the work. Now, sports performance, like I said, this is number 5, right? So number 1, movement quality, number 2, strength, number 3, speed and power, number 4, skill and strategy, and then number 5, our last one, is sports performance. This is when we compete. This is when we're able to play free and express our athleticism at full speed, right? So now you're able to get out there, you're able to rip it apart, you're able to go out there and show off the skill sets that you've been able to develop in the gym, and this is when you see an athlete at their full potential, right? So no one's really, I would say when we focus on just playing the sport, like playing year-long baseball, I think is a big problem. So over-specialization, right? When we're playing one sport all the time, that is what I would say when people are starting at number 5 before they're doing the rest of the stuff, is that they're focused on games and they're not focusing on preparation, right? And that's going to hurt an athlete long term because they're not really ready for the demand of that sport, and then you're giving them an increased demand under pressure. So it's just going to lead to a lot of wear and tear. And then most importantly, when an athlete starts to kind of go through this burnout phase, they start to lose their passion for the game, and this kind of pulls them away from being engaged in the sport that they're playing. So I think one of the most important things when we look at our performance in the sport, so when we look through this one more time, movement quality, strength, speed and power, number 4, skill and strategy, and then number 5, sports performance. What I mean is that a lot of times we have athletes that are only focused on the sports performance side of things, and they're just only playing games and are not really preparing themselves as an athlete, and they're never going to reach the same level of success that an athlete that is focused on from the bottom up, working on their movement quality, working on their strength, developing speed and power the right way in the right sequence, working on their skill and their strategy. So working on those agility, change of direction drills, but making sure they have a foundation before they start that. And then most importantly, letting all of that preparation prepare them for the sport performance itself. So you see in the game what they've done in practice, right? You see in the game what they've done in practice. And there's some athletes who are going to be able to go out there and play in a game, and they're going to be able to perform at a high level, but they're not going to be able to do that for a sustainable period. They're not going to be able to do that for the rest of their life. And most importantly, when they get into a level of higher competition, so whether that be when they leave little league ball, town ball, and they get to travel ball, or whether they get from, get into high school, or when they get into college, right? The next level, you're always exposed to next level athletes. The competition always gets much more fierce, and this is something that I learned at a very early age. I remember when I was playing baseball in town, and then we started playing travel ball, and I noticed that the skill level went up, and then I started getting invited into special teams, and then I was just like, wow, I'm playing with some of the best kids in the country, right? And you could see the skill that they had, the strength and the power, and you can tell that they had been working with coaches for a long period of time. And I honestly, that helped motivate me to be able to work even harder, because I realized that, man, if I want to take my game to the next level, if I want to look like some of these guys that I'm out here competing with, then I need to go back to the lab. I need to work harder. I need to put in the work, because I want to see the level of performance that I was seeing in some of my peers that had been doing it for a longer period than I was. So that's the beautiful thing about being around other kids, other athletes, is that you get to see and really kind of stack yourself up against where everyone else is. And I would say that if you're a parent watching this, get your kids going early in development, right? So it's only lifting weights at 5 years old, but they can still be working on body weight and mechanics and squatting and doing push-ups, doing running and working on their form and their technique. Like, there are things that you can do at an early age that are going to help develop your athlete, right? As they start to get older, you want to develop that strength as soon as you can. So you need to get them with someone who has the understanding, the knowledge, the skill sets, but most importantly, the patience and the passion to be able to take your athlete wherever they're at and develop them into where they know that they can go. Because I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I love what I do, is that I know that, like, it's not about that workout, right? When I get an athlete, when I get an adult athlete, like, it's not about that workout, man. It's about what we're going to see in 12 weeks from now. It's about what we're going to see in 12 months from now, right? I love being able to see that finish line, because, like, that's when I have that happy moment as a coach. I get excited when I see them see the results and get excited for themselves. That's the real game, right? Is that we need to get away. If you're a coach and you're really, like, seeing all the stuff about, like, 5 speed drills and 5 power drills, and you think that that's what training is, and you're just throwing that into the workouts, like, just go back to the lab, go back to, getting some core beliefs on what you believe development is really about, and then kind of just re-engineer what you're doing, what your approach is, because I always say we should always be challenging ourselves to get better. Like, I'm always learning, I'm always watching other people, trying to figure out what things to do, what things not to do. I'm always kind of sitting with myself, like, after a workout. I think this is when I have my most intense moments, when I get done a training session. start breaking down what I did, the philosophy behind it. Does this transfer? Who does this apply to? I think in science, a lot of people make the mistake of trying to come up with answers to so many things. And one thing that I've learned over time, the secret to success of building and growing and maturing in our field is that we don't actually get to more answers, is that we invoke more curiosity to ask more questions, right? We ask better questions. So it's more questions, but it's better questions, right? So quantity and quality, when we have those, we start coming up with a lot of ideas that are really going to change the game and really help develop athletes in a better way. So with that being said, how does this apply? What is your take home for today? Application of this. If you're an athlete, right, become an athlete first, right? Master movement, build your strength, and then build strength year round, right? Don't focus on, am I getting better for this 6-week challenge, right? Do I have a 6-week speed? Like I've seen it advertised online, like, do my 6-week speed program, right? And it's just like, if we're at a point where we're trying to improve our speed in the next 6 weeks, like we've missed the shot. We've missed the ball, right? We should have been developing our speed for the last year, for the last 2 to 3 years, right? There's no way that we're going to do anything significant in 6 weeks. Like, can you focus on your speed and like work on your mechanics and just like have your training be focused on speed for 6 weeks? Yes. But are you going to get faster in 6 weeks? No, right? That's not going to happen. Maybe you might shave a couple seconds off your 40 time by cleaning up your mechanics, but you're not going to actually get much faster in 6 weeks. So you really have to pay attention to what you're doing year round, build your strength, focus on developing speed and power, and do the long game approach. There's no shortcuts to success when it comes to athlete development. If you're a parent, make sure that you're asking the right questions, right? I can't stress this enough. Like I said this earlier in this video, like if your kid is arriving at a facility and the coach is just throwing them into the workout program with the rest of the kids and they haven't really done an assessment, right? They haven't really figured out what their limiting factors are. They haven't figured out what their roadmap is going to look like and what areas that they should be focusing on to develop your kid the most. I would run for the hills, because that program, they might be good, but they're not really focused on what your kid actually needs. And I think that's the most important thing, is that I always believe that when a parent or a family comes to me, say it's a husband or wife, they want to train with me. If it's a kid, an athlete, they want to train with me. Like, I need to respect that person and their journey, right? Respect that person and their journey. And what that means is that I need to take the time. You're never too busy to work with your customer, right? You're never too busy to focus on the client. So you need to focus on what they need and actually develop the plan for them. The better you get at this, the longer you're in the game, the easier it becomes and the more efficient you become at it. But like, man, take the time, whether that's 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, an hour, wherever it may take, for you to really break down that person that you're working with and develop the right roadmap, because like they're giving you their time, they're giving you their hard-earned money. So it's up to us as a coach to make sure that we're delivering at the highest capability that we are able to do for them, right? That's customer satisfaction. That's putting the customer first, right? Now, we said at our gym we're a client-focused first gym, right? We're not a profit-focused first gym. We're a client-focused first gym. And when you do that, everything else kind of falls in line, right? That's how you're able to charge more, is because people know that when they come to you, you're going to take your time to do the best job that you can possibly do, because that's a level of professionalism that you bring to the game. Right? So making sure that you're asking the right questions. Are they getting stronger? Are they moving better? Are they getting faster? Is there even an evaluation process for you to be able to figure out those answers? Right? Those are the tough questions that we have to start asking and hold our coaches accountable to. So if you're going to spend the money, make sure you're spending it on the people that are doing the right stuff. Coaches, right? Your job isn't just to get your athlete tired, right? Your job isn't just to get them exhausted, get them tired, right? I just see people working people and being like beast mode. Oh, we push them hard. We push our athletes harder than anyone else. Like, that is not something that we should be giving out medals for, right? I would rather my athlete go home fresh, right? Maybe not worked out as hard as we can push them, but they got a lot of work done and they got better in that session, and now they can actually recover fully before they come to me the next time. So if I'm training them on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I blow them out if I just like come out and blow their system out of whack on Monday, I'm not getting good quality work on Wednesday, and I'm not getting good quality work on Friday, right? So as a coach, we have to really look at that, and I would train people a certain way. Like on Friday, I might do max loading for them, right? Because I knew that I was giving them extra time to over the weekend recover, right? So if I'm doing my heavy lifting on Friday, I know that they have Saturday and Sunday and most of Monday to recover before I see them again on Monday. And most importantly, they're going to be eating all weekend. They're going to be, putting tons of calories into their body. So I know that if I lift them heavy on Friday, they're going to eat a lot of food. That food is going to be transferred into fuel. And then come Monday, they're going to be rested and recovered so they can hit hard again starting on Monday and getting very effective training in. Those are some of the things I look at. Like we said, your job isn't just to get your athlete tired. Your job is to actually make them better. Right? Your program should make the athlete better. It shouldn't just get them exhausted. It shouldn't just be really fancy drills that we call elite. It shouldn't just be the next Instagram viral clip that you get from your workout. It should be focused on, hey, can I take this group of athletes and help them get to the next level in their life, whether that's being on a high school team, being on a college team, and like if we're lucky enough to get those athletes that are blessed enough to go professional, like can you make sure that you get them to that level and do it in the safest manner possible? That is the key of a strength coach, a strength and performance coach. Our job is not to do the next viral clip for Instagram. It's not to like come up with the next crazy philosophy of why we should be doing elastic training in our ankles, right? It's not that we should be doing barefoot training with everyone because we think that that's going to be the next thing. If strong feet is going to make a better athlete. No, we need to be making sure that we are doing sound scientific principles that have been tested over time and we've seen it work. I always look at, I'm using stuff that they've been doing in the 50s and I keep doing it, right? Because I know that the old school stuff works. Like I will sprinkle in the new stuff, but I know that doing the things that we've been doing for a long period of time and just adding a little bit more of my own twist or my own flair, that is the key to success. It's not reinventing the wheel, right? So my takeaway is that the order matters, right? The order matters as much as the work. I'm going to say that again. The order matters as much as the work. If we want to really develop athletes, we need to stop thinking about skills and sports performance first. We need to start thinking about movement quality, building up strength, building up their speed and their endurance, right? Building up their power development, but most importantly, teaching them how to absorb force and decelerate too, because if we build the engine but we don't take care of the athlete, that's how they end up getting hurt. All right, guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Impact Performance Show. I'm your host, Coach Chris, and like I said, check out some of those videos that we posted so that you can get up to speed with all things athlete development. And if you're a parent looking to help your athlete get to the next level, if you're a coach looking for the right strategies, the right orders, I put all of these frameworks, this whole season that we're doing right now, this whole season is dedicated to this book, the Parent's Guide to Athlete Development. So every episode that we're doing on the Impact Performance Show, there are 12 episodes. We're going to be diving into frameworks that are inside of this book, right? And I said in one of my videos that I wrote this book for like my dad, right? Because like my dad helped develop me as an athlete. He helped train me when I was younger, but he didn't have a manual. He didn't have a sports science guy to be able to write a book, to be able to break down their philosophy, their approach on development and what they should be doing with their athlete, right? He didn't have all that. He was going off of the knowledge that he had based on what he was given and his experiences in life. So you have experiences in life. You have I guess you can say a default mode of what you know, but this book is going to help fill in the gaps on everything that you need to know to be able to make sure that your athlete can develop, right? So if you want to learn more about how we think about training, how we think about building speed, how we think about building strength, how we think about how you should be interacting with your kid at home to make sure that their mindset is on the level that they need to be on and that you're actually helping guide them towards success and not sabotaging their success. Every element that I just talked about is in this book. It is a full workbook with tons of pictures and diagrams that explain all of the different frameworks in detail that are going to be able to help you get your athlete to the next level. So please check it out. It's in the descriptions. The link to the Amazon store. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it in paperback. It's like a big workbook style book, so you can kind of write in it. And then on my site, I'll actually have the full workbook where you can actually get that, download that, and actually like fill in and work along with the actual book. So there's a book that you can get for Amazon, and then soon we'll be releasing the actual workbook, which is something that you can take home where you can like write in all the different pages and kind of do planning for like what their workouts are and all that great stuff. So you can find that in the description below. Thank you again for tuning into the show. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment. I'm always looking to engage with you guys, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.